Hi everyone and welcome. In this 30-minute presentation, we'll take a look at what the zztat framework is and how it can help you to boost your database business. But first of all, I need to apologize for not being able to do this live. We've had some audio issues with the webinar software that we couldn't resolve. But that also means that we can't do any live questions at the end. So I'll be leaving my email address with you, and you're most welcome to contact me anytime with any questions you may have, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Right, so who am I? My name's Stefan. Hi. I've been working with Oracle for close to 2 decades, mainly professionally, but also a large amount of that time during my spare time, just because I'm greatly interested in the subject of the Oracle database and what it can do, and I greatly enjoy working with it. I am the core framework developer of zztat. I've invested well over 2,000 hours so far into the software, and most of the components that you'll see today have been designed and written by me. So what are we going to talk about today? We'll take a look at a rough overview of what the framework is and how it operates. And then in the second part, we'll take a look at what this means for your Oracle shop or your database shop in general, and how we can support you through the use of automation in our framework. And yeah, in closing, I will take a look at some of the upcoming features and the direction of where we see zztat heading. So what am I talking about here? Zztat is basically a database reaction framework. So the focus lies on automatically being able to react to certain conditions in your environment. So we collect data about your environment, be this performance data, space usage data, just general data about your databases. We analyze and we evaluate that data, and we can then automatically react based on that data. A little bit of terminology. In zztat, the data points of interest are called metrics. So that's the data we collect. We then use gauges to analyze that data, and finally reactions to act on it. So the framework itself is client-server based, which means we use a repository database where we store the historic data and all the metadata and configuration data about the framework. And this is also where the zztat user interface is running on top of. This means that your target databases are basically the clients, and there's just the databases, so there's no external software of any kind. And the target databases are uploading the data to the repository where it is then archived and kept long-term. By the way, there is a second presentation as part of these Oracle webinar series that we have. zztat A Look Inside is what it's called. So if by the end of this presentation you'd like to know more and hear a bit more about all the individual processes and their tasks and their roles in the framework and what exactly they do, I'd highly recommend that you take a look at that presentation. Right, so from the ground up, when designing the framework itself, the main idea was that this product has to be fully customizable and extensible. So this includes any of the components that we ship with the framework. All of the metrics which are built in, you're free to customize those to your needs. You can add your own metrics, of course, your own gauges, and you can even write your own reactions if you so choose. On top of that, there are many different parameters that you can use to control how the framework reacts and how it behaves. The core of the framework is 100% SQL and PL SQL, which means that the code runs inside the database itself, which is right where the data is that we are trying to work with as well. So there's no agents whatsoever. We're not going to run any kind of huge memory hogging Java processes on your servers. It's all in the database. The management is fully centralized. So this means that the repository is the single source of truth, and all the configuration changes and data collection configurations and everything can be done in the repository in a single place. So it is a full-featured monitoring product. It is very modular. So it has individual processes which are performing specific tasks, kind of like the Oracle database itself, right? Where you have the pmon, the log writer, the database writer, etc. So zztat functions in a very similar way. Out of the box, we ship close to 100 metrics now that we have the gateways built in. So there's a lot of functionality that you get basically out of the box without actually having to write your own SQL. We also have a variety of different reports that the framework can produce depending on the conditions that it encounters. So we have session reports, we have latch reports, we have mutex reports, etc. The framework is also highly instrumented. So this means that its activity is logged in great detail, and we can also, at the push of a button, quite literally enable tracing for the framework itself if there are any issues or any performance problems with it. Out of the box, we support pretty much all the current Oracle database versions. So 11.204 and higher. It's basically it. 18c, we're currently testing and evaluating, but so far there has been no issues with it. So it's probably going to make the list of supported versions shortly. We can run on standard and on enterprise edition. This goes for both the repository and any kind of target databases. So this means you don't need any kind of additional licensing on top of your database license. I mean, of course, you need to be legally allowed to run Oracle. So that goes for the repository as well. But on top of that, you don't need anything. So you don't need, for example, partitioning licenses. The framework can emulate that with the use of partition views. And we offer a full global product support and distribution through a partner company in Australia that we are in a partnership agreement with. The framework has a UI built in Oracle Application Express version 5. So anything that you want to do in the framework, you can do either through the UI or through a PL/SQL API. So this means that the whole framework and all of its functionality is completely scriptable, and you can easily integrate that with any kind of management software that you may have, such as Chef, Ansible, or Puppet, etc. The UI is also fully translatable. Currently, it's just in English, but it has been designed in a way that allows us to translate this into additional languages fairly easily. Right, so let's talk a little bit about the DBA and the current role that the DBA plays in enterprises and how that may change in the future. So the database business today is really fast-paced, and it's getting more and more fast-paced. So if anything experiences an outage or anything goes down, it quickly costs businesses a lot of money. So there is a constantly increasing demand for fast reactions and for fast decision making, and that can obviously lead to errors. And it is a known fact. I mean, I've been there myself after a 12 or 14-hour day and being woken up again by the pager at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Even the simplest thing becomes hard. So the DBA work is really shifting. There's also less and less people, less and less budgets everywhere. but at the same time, there's more and more databases and more data. So we need to do something that we can overcome this and kind of become more efficient. And that's where we see the role of frameworks to really shine. Now, the main role that I see in the zztat framework is the use of automation to support the DBA. And I want to make it very clear that when I say automation and automating database tasks, in no way at all do I mean that we automate the DBA out of the way. So we're not trying to replace the DBA, quite the contrary. What we're trying to do is just make the DBA's life easier and make the DBA more productive and more efficient through the use of automation. So if you're looking at what a DBA does, especially when he's on call, a lot of that work is fairly repetitive, and it's also, in most cases, it's fairly basic and fairly straightforward. So this super complex multi-tier performance problem that you need to solve, that of course happens, but that's not what you get on a daily basis. On a daily basis, it's going to be fairly simple and almost kind of boring work that you need to do. So that's the kind of things that we try to automate and support the DBA. And the other thing is that through the use of automation, we aim to provide more information to the DBA. So for example, if you're getting an alert from your traditional monitoring tool, the tool is going to tell you, we have blocking sessions on database DB72, and that's that. So then the DBA has to connect and take a look at what's exactly happening and what actually caused this alert. Not so with zztat. If zztat sends you an alert, it will automatically tell you what exactly is going on right now and what led to this alert being raised. So here's an example of such an email that goes out when we're seeing some blocking sessions. So you can see we have all the details readily available that at a single glance, the DBA knows exactly what he's up against. Now, if this is a situation that we were able to automatically resolve, you would see this in this email as well. But in this particular case here, there has been no reaction fired, nothing corrective has been done. So we tell the DBA that the session is going to continue normally after the report production here has completed. So the DBA still has to go and take a look at it if he so chooses, or if this is maybe a known situation that he doesn't need to do anything and he knows that it's going to resolve itself. But he has all the information he needs readily available right when he gets the alert. Another example, and I'm sure if you've ever been a DBA on call, you're familiar with this. When a table space runs out of space, out of disk space, you're going to get paged. And whenever this may be, right? So at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning seems to be the time when most databases run out of space. So you have to connect to your VPN, you have to find the credentials to the server from your password vault, you have to connect to the database, you have to look at the space usage, you have to see if there's enough space to add a new file, and ultimately you're going to end up adding a new file and then going back to sleep. So easily 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on the situation and your environment, have been wasted. With zztat out of the box, and if you leave it enabled, we are collecting tablespace data. So by default, again, every 5 minutes, but you can change that if you choose. And immediately after we collect the data, we gauge it, we analyze it, and if the free space runs low, and if there's still enough sufficient space available, we automatically add a file. When the DBA then at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning arrives at the office, he will have slept through the night, and he will see an email that the framework has added a file to that tablespace on this database or to this tablespace on that database. Or here's another example. If you have a resource contention in the database, what frequently happens is that these monitoring tools just tell you, yeah, there is a contention, you have to go check it out. So you go through the whole chain of events again until you're finally connected to that database. And by the time you get there, the contention is already gone. And in certain scenarios, especially depending on what type of contention it was, you may not even be able to determine the root cause anymore without having the proper diagnostics data available. So with the framework, when we detect a resource contention, it automatically collects diagnostics. And right now we have two different types of contentions that we support advanced diagnostics collection for. That's latching and mutexes. So there are reactions built in to zztat, which can do high-speed sampling against the latching resources in the Oracle Data Dictionary, and then automatically produce a report, which you will receive together with your alert. So this means, again, when you get paged, you will immediately see what exactly is going on in your database, and you'll be able to resolve the issue much, much quicker. And the other thing, of course, is, let's say you repeatedly have issues with contentions on a specific database, and this always happens during off hours, like during large data loads, during the night, or something along those lines. And you file a support ticket with Oracle Support for help to ask them to help you resolve it. And in most cases, they're going to want more information. So they're going to need specific diagnostics data, which you need to take right when the problem happens. And that may not always be so trivial if you're bound to do this manually. But with the framework, we have reactions built in that you can enable to, for example, automatically collect a hang analyze, which collects details about any kind of blocking events in the entire database. And of course, when we do things like this, you have to be mindful that these are somewhat intrusive actions. So for this reason, the framework also supports throttling of reactions. So a hang analyze, for example, you can limit to run no more than twice an hour, for example. But it will make sure that you have the data available when you need it. Right, so as you can see, the main idea really is for the framework to support the DBA and to make the life of the DBA easier and allow him to be more productive. Now I still have a few slides. I want to talk about some of the future, some of the things that are to come and which are basically being actively developed right now. One big thing we have common are gateways. The gateways allow zztat to receive data from non-Oracle databases. So initially, this is going to be Postgres, MySQL, DynamoDB, but also things like Memcached, Redis. You can probably see where this is going. And on top of that, the AWS CLI data. So if you are running on AWS and you have a fairly large environment running there, you're probably intimately familiar with the fact that it can be fairly complex to just retain control over what runs where and how it runs and how things are exactly configured and to enforce standards. By letting the framework collect this metadata, we can then use all the existing functionality to also analyze that data and react to certain conditions in that data. And the way this has been implemented is that, so even if you're getting data from Postgres or from MySQL, more than 80% of the code that is going to run is going to be exactly the same code. The only thing that really changes is that the metric isn't collected on an Oracle database, but on a Postgres or MySQL database, or even any kind of other resource. But once it arrives on the repository, all the code there is exactly the same code that it has always been there. So it's proven and working technology that has just been enhanced in a way that allows us to basically collect data from anywhere. A few other things we have. One big one is the zztat mobile application. You can see a screenshot here of that in action in its beta version right now. The idea here is that we want to allow you to have a interface into your database environment without actually having to connect to your database environment. So the only connection that you need is a connection to the repository over HTTPS using two-factor authentication. And we allow you to, for example, when you're receiving an alert on a session that has any kind of issues, to retrieve a live session report from that target database without ever connecting to it. In addition to that, it's all configurable, of course. I'd like to say this again. So this feature has to be enabled for it to work, and any kind of additional options, such as, for example, killing sessions via zztat mobile, also has to be enabled separately. But you can do that if you choose. The other thing that we want to do is upgrade our reports to be more reactive. And what I mean by that is right now we're sending out plain text reports. We want to add the option of having HTML reports, which are including links, so that you could be taken directly to the metric page, for example, of the metric data or the gauge that has produced the alert email that you're reading. Now with zztat Mobile, we have built a REST API, and we also want to make use of that to provide additional data sets via REST. So for any kind of interfaces you may have in your environment, you'll be able to fetch data that you can determine yourself and configure yourself via the zztat UI and make that available to any kind of external environments. The zztat Report Lab is another thing which is going to be released with the patch set 1, and we have quite big plans for that. Right now, what it can do is that you can create your own custom reports without having to write SQL yourself. So we basically use the metric history tables as our source of input and provide you with a user interface to assemble your own reports. And the same thing also goes for charts, by the way. So the idea there is to have a dashboard that you can completely customize based on your liking, and together with zztat user management. So we are now multi-user capable on the UI. Every single user can basically configure their own dashboard to their liking. And another thing I want to mention is global reports. And what I mean by that is that we want to provide health checks, so that, for example, once a week you get an email from zztat that gives you a health overview of your entire environment at a glance. Right. Yeah, I timed it almost perfectly so that we would have 5 minutes for questions, but unfortunately, yeah, we can't do that. So I'll have to defer you to my email, stefan@zztat.net, for any kind of technical questions or really anything you would like to know about the zztat framework. And if you have any inquiries as to, hey, how much does this stuff cost, and can we get a free trial? Yes, you can. you can contact our distributor at sales@clouddb.solutions. All right, thank you for your time, and I hope to hear from you soon.